During my time in the Fire Emblem fan community, one of the most popular ideas for new games in the series is this one. A sequel to Fire Emblem Awakening that explores the children's dark future as they struggle against the evil dragon Grima. Oh, did I say there will be spoilers in this video already? Well, there will be for Awakening and maybe some other Fire Emblem games. Oh well, those weren't big ones. Nonetheless though, it is a very popular idea. But how would it actually work? Well, that's where I come in. I'm going to talk through what I see as the crucial elements to consider with a sequel to Awakening, and at least some of my thoughts on what intelligent systems should do if they ever choose to go through with this idea. First off though, some background for all the people wondering what the heck Fire Emblem Awakening is. Fire Emblem Awakening is the 13th game in the series of turn-based strategy RPGs called Fire Emblem, produced by Intelligent Systems and Nintendo. The game represented a turning point in the series from niche to mainstream, when there had been serious considerations about pulling the plug on the series. It was critically and commercially successful, and though some may dispute this, did in fact save the franchise. Among the Fire Emblem community, the game is also well-liked, but it does have its vocal critics. These critics tend to attribute Awakening as the game that started Fire Emblem down the path of becoming more fan service heavy, and they also criticize it for its weak story and broken combat. I personally fall into the former category, as Awakening is one of my favorite games in the series, but I do understand the points of its critics. The important aspects of the story for this video are that the Shepherds, led by Prince Chrom, are a group of soldiers fighting for the country of Elise. Earlier on in Awakening, they meet and recruit the Avatar, Robin, who has a mysterious backstory and amnesia. In addition, they meet a masked figure who calls themselves Marth, the name of an old legendary hero, who warns them about a bleak future. At the same time, a new threat called Risen arrive in Elise. Marth is eventually revealed to be Chrom's future daughter Lucina, who traveled back to prevent the disastrous occurrences that led to her dark future. She didn't travel back alone though, as the other kids from the future came back too, becoming available once you get their parents together. It is later revealed that Robin is in fact the vessel for Grima, the fell dragon that takes power in Lucina's future. He is also the person that killed Chrom in that future, and either directly or indirectly was responsible for killing off all of the parents' generation. In Awakening though, Robin manages to stay free of Grima's possession with the help of Lucina, Chrom, and the Shepherds, and they defeat Grima and everyone lives happily ever after. That's a pretty basic overview, and I will be discussing nuances from Awakening in the rest of the video to support my points, but that should mostly cover it. The general premise then for a sequel to Awakening is Lucina and the other children in the bad future fighting Grima. That's a broad outline though as far as the story goes, so over the rest of the video I'll be narrowing in on certain parts of making this sequel that the developers would have to figure out, and offering my own ideas on top of it. These include, but are not limited to, gameplay, characters, and story. Let's get started on the gameplay. Obviously, the gameplay would mirror Awakening's gameplay for the most part, but the series has undergone some changes in the games since Awakening, notably with the pair-up mechanic that Awakening introduced. What then should the developers do? Well, they should take some stuff and leave some stuff, in my opinion. I think it would make sense for the sequel to adopt Fate's dual guard and dual strike systems, rather than simply copying Awakening's pair-up system. This addition would also include enemies being able to do the same, as it adds an extra level of challenge for the player when strategizing. Combat arts, originated in Shadows of Valentia, could also make an appearance, connected more to the characters though rather than the weapons being wielded, because the one-weapon system for Shadows is not gonna happen for this theoretical game. In addition, unbreakable weapons would not be brought in for the game, as it should stay faithful to Awakening and most of the series in that regard. Combat arts could also be either replaced by or supplemented by personal skills from Fates, allowing the characters to be even more unique as units. One major gameplay aspect from Awakening that I would cut would be reclassing. You get the units you're given. If this is too extreme, then maybe it could be implemented in a Shadows of Valentia style of extremely limited class changes with specific rare items. Reclassing was one of the reasons Awakening's gameplay could be so broken, and to avoid that, player reclassing should be limited, if not eliminated. That covers most of the in-battle gameplay that I think should be added or subtracted. Next is the overworld gameplay. Awakening had an overworld map with unlimited grinding and skirmishes that could be done in between battles. This feature should not be in a sequel because of the tense situation in which Lucina and her followers find themselves in. The luxury of time is not on their side, and the gameplay should reflect that. However, one aspect from Fate's overworld style gameplay that I could see being included would be the My Castle system. Now though, it becomes more base management, as you know at some point Grima and his forces will strike at your home base. A mission that should be in the game as well, akin to XCOM's base defense missions. That is what you are preparing defenses for, but it is still customizable and offers a safe place for downtime, army management, and going through supports. Speaking of supports, they would operate in much the same way as Awakening, being viewed out of battle and going from C rank to S rank. But obviously, no kids. No child units, period, end of story, no need to shoehorn them in. Now, map design is a big thing for people, and a big problem for people when it came to Awakening. But I don't even know how I'd address that, so I'll leave that up to the fertile imaginations of others. What I can discuss, though, is varying up map objectives. As I said before, Lucina and her army are in a tense situation, badly outnumbered and playing defensive all the time. The missions, of course, should reflect that. Have escape missions such as Blood Runs Red from Path of Radiance, or defense missions, maybe Kill the Commander missions, but they're set up so that if you try to rout everyone, it'll all come crashing down around you. This army operates in guerrilla warfare with surgical strikes to disrupt Grima's operation. Lucina and her group are effectively an insurgent resistance movement without a major country's backing, unlike pretty much every other group in Fire Emblem history. And that feeling should be constant throughout the game. This proposal solves the problem of Awakening's lack of mission variety while also establishing the bleak world in which the game takes place, and distinguishing it from other Fire Emblem games. Obviously, not all problems are easy fixes, and another problem I've been wrestling with is a perfect transition into the next section of this video: the characters. I love Fire Emblem characters, getting to know them and fighting with them on the battlefield. That's why it is very important to get them right. But the first problem an Awakening sequel would have is simply the number of characters. Counting all the children from Awakening leaves the cast at 13 characters. For reference, the smallest cast in all of Fire Emblem so far has been 32 for Fire Emblem Gaiden, and 33 for Sacred Stones among the games released in the West. A cast that's less than half that would be a little difficult to work with. Except, Gaiden has you controlling separate armies of a maximum of 16 units in them for much of the game. So a Fire Emblem game with that many units is doable, but adjustments must be made. First off is the addition of a few characters, because not all the parent generation has to have died in Grima's advance. Starting with Flavia. The East Khan of Ferox was never stated to have died in Awakening, just Basilio, and that makes her available to me for inclusion in the cast, possibly as the game's resident Jagan. Next is Tiki, and I'm not just including her because she's one of my favorite characters in all of Fire Emblem. For Awakening has DLC depicting the bleak future called the Future Past, and in it, Tiki joins up with Lucina to fight Grima. And of course, there's Anna, who's been in every Fire Emblem game that's not Gaiden or its remake. She absolutely would return, perhaps with a more serious attitude due to the perilous situation, which may make her a more interesting character. Plus, that gives the cast someone who can open chests since there isn't a thief in the second generation. That takes the cast size up to 16, although there is one caveat, and that caveat has a name: Morgan. Morgan is currently counted among the cast, but here's the sticking point. Morgan is the son or daughter of Robin/Grima. In the future past, both male and female Morgan join up with Grima to fight against Lucina and the others. Also, don't ask about how both male and female Morgan are there, it just happens. My solution would be to keep Morgan in a villainous role, at least initially. But eventually they could be shown Grima's vicious nature and be swayed to fight alongside the resistance. I mean, it's a Fire Emblem game. There's got to be a recruitable enemy at some point. Who else are you gonna recruit? Valadar? Aversa? Wait, hang on. Since Aversa can be recruited in the Spot Pass chapters, having her also go through a similar disenchantment with Grima and his followers could lead her to also become recruitable. And look at that. The cast is now at 17. Could it be expanded further? Yes, theoretically. The developers could introduce entirely new characters, some of whom could be related to previous characters. One possibility is one of Kellam's 5 brothers becoming playable. But here's the inherent problem with introducing any of those new characters into the game. It becomes conspicuous that they're never mentioned in Awakening. Oh yeah, this person was our ally across many battles. They even S-ranked Cynthia, but now they're not with us, so I guess we'll just pretend they don't exist, okay? To use the Kellam example, wouldn't that be mentioned to him at least once that they knew his brother as an ally? Rather than messing with all that, I think a smaller cast of established characters can work, like playing as the Grail mercenaries in Radiant Dawn. What then do the developers do to avoid a situation where a player is stuck in a bad position because they can't afford to lose many units in this game with a permadeath system? Never fear, because inspiration is always just around the corner, and look, it's Shadows of Valentia. There are a couple of ways Shadows of Valentia manages to avoid the kind of nightmare situation I just described. The first, that was also in the original Gaiden, is revival shrines that can bring units back to life. Certainly including those would take some of the pressure off the player. The bigger part, though, is bringing back Milla's turn wheel. A new addition for Shadows of Valentia, this turn wheel allowed players to take back moves to redo them a limited number of times. Why not bring it back, either as Naga's version of it, or perhaps even the original one, since it exists in the same world? There could be a mission to recover the supposedly lost turn wheel to use as a weapon against Grima. The other possibility, if things go terribly wrong for the army, is a mechanic I've taken from Genealogy of the Holy War: replacement units. If a main cast member dies, they could be replaced by a named character who has little background. The consequences of the death are still felt without hampering the player's ability to continue playing the game. Those mechanics would hopefully solve some of the problems that could occur with a small cast, but now it's time to focus in on the crucial characters of the game, starting with the antagonist, Grima. Grima is an unrepentant monster who is trying to destroy mankind with his army of Risen. Oh, and since I mentioned the Risen, they would also, of course, be included, but I think more class diversity could be introduced, including Risen Monachites. Perhaps some Shadow Dragon characters could become Risen. Just some ideas to prevent the Risen from getting faceless syndrome. Anyways, back to Grima. Grima is a terrible creature hell-bent on destroying humanity. Simply the bad guy. So how did the developers avoid making Grima a one-note generic villain? There are a couple of ways I'd accomplish this. First off is having him adopt a role like the Black Knight's role in Path of Radiance, appearing multiple times throughout the game without engaging directly with Lucina at any point. Having this ominous looming presence constantly pressuring the army and forcing them into tough situations can make Grima seem more formidable without oversaturating the player with battles against him. It subtly reminds the player of the ultimate evil and goal of the game, and because of Lucina and Grima's personal connection, the continued fear of Grima can lend greater narrative weight. just like it did with the Black Knight and Ike for Path of Radiance. The second thing I would do is also inspired by another Fire Emblem villain, Lion from Sacred Stones. This part, though, only works if one thing is true. The cast does not know Robin is the vessel of Grima. There is precedent for this take because in Awakening, Lucina does not figure out Robin is the vessel of Grima until late game, which means she didn't know before traveling back in time. She didn't know who killed Chrom other than that it was a close friend. Using that mystery as part of Lucina's story enables the revelation that it was Robin, who in my version is effectively a close aunt or uncle of Lucina, even more crushing. Now though, with that revelation, the hope from Lucina, and maybe some of the others, that Robin could be saved, could be brought into play. And that's where the Lion comparison happens. In Future Past, there is a scenario in which Robin takes temporary control back from Grima and begs Lucina to kill him. In that moment, Lucina is unable to because she wonders if Robin could be saved. Much like Erica and Ephraim in Sacred Stones, the personal connection to the enemy can cause conflict about whether the path of destruction is the right one or whether salvation is possible. Lion seems to be fighting for Motus's influence and manages to speak normally to Erica, and having a moment like that for Lucina and Robin would be quite meaningful. Like with Sacred Stones, however, I would ultimately choose salvation to be impossible. Grima's corruption is too deep, but having moments in the end where Robin can overcome Grima's control and speak to Lucina makes Robin a more tragic figure. Going back to Grima for a moment though, I think having Grima be obsessed with the idea of fate could lend another important story connection to Lucina in the game. It would make Lucina's
"I challenge my fate!"
more impactful if that was how Grima taunted her. Your fate is death, just like your parents, your friends, and your world. Little details like this may not be the biggest choices, but I like this one as a way to contrast our protagonist and antagonist, especially since fate in most stories decrees the heroes will emerge victorious. Swapping that adds a unique twist to the tale as Lucina gets to defy the prophetic or fated outcome. Hopefully, these narrative choices would help make Grima a memorable villain and lead to a strong story. But all are quite dependent on the main character to pull this off. Lucina would absolutely be the main character. The only main character. No dual protagonist, no trio, and no avatar stealing focus. It's just Lucina. Here's the interesting challenge though of Lucina's character, because while this game would be a sequel, her character would have to be treated as though it was a prequel. Same for everyone else's of the children. They've already lived through basically the events of what would happen in this game and came out the other side of it as their awakening counterparts. That means in order for believable character arcs to happen, they must start at a point and then develop into the pre-established character. We have the after, and what we need to find then is the before and the process that brought them to the after. Now, I could go through this for every single child unit, but Lucina would be the most important, so she'll be my focus. She is a serious and strong young woman with lofty expectations for herself because of the legacy of her heroes Martha and Chrom. She's extremely determined and willing to do almost whatever it takes to prevent the disasters she knows are coming. She can also be distant because of her polite and withdrawn attitude, which seems to be a purposeful trait at times to prevent her getting too attached. Despite this, she shows signs of incredibly strong bonds with her friends that help drive her to achieve her goals. She also has childish moments, especially with her siblings, and a strange taste for fashion. That last part might not feature as much in this game, but who knows, maybe for some laughs amid all the calamity. That is the Lucina the story should end up with, and there are several ways the developers could go about this, but I'll tell you how I'd do it. Firstly, starting with her heroes Marth and Chrom. They are her inspiration and light, but they are also the expectations that weigh her down throughout her journey. She must reach the heights they ascended to as their descendant. These stakes are incredibly high, and they also center largely on Lucina. She is the only one who can wield falchion, which effectively makes her the only person who can defeat Grima. That responsibility could play different effects on her, preventing her from showing weakness because everyone needs her to be strong as the Exalt leader and only hope for the continent. It also could cause a level of mistrust if allies screw up because Lucina knows the onus is on her for every mistake that happens. She knows every decision she makes will be scrutinized. It's understandable how that would foster some insecurities within Lucina, leading her to act alone more often than she should because she doesn't want to burden others, but also because she can't trust anyone but herself, since that's been the lesson drilled into her probably since Crom's death. Help us, Lucina. You're our only hope. A whole lot of pressure for one person. Those trust issues and burdens could be resolved through the eventual realization that she simply cannot win against Grima alone. I may be the only one able to wield falchion, and I have to strike the final blow, but I can't defeat Grima alone. I need my friends to get me there. That sets up a good arc of bringing the cast together as they show Lucina how to trust her allies and that the weight is not just on her shoulders. Our bonds will be what allows us to defeat Grima. This theme of bonds is taken straight from Awakening, and echoing that in this story would help emphasize the connectedness of the games. Once again, it is the bonds of the people of the continent uniting to defeat Grima. It also can help crack the serious and withdrawn nature of Lucina in a believable way, allowing her to remain that way most of the time, since that is a big part of her personality, but also show how her gradual growth of trust can draw her out of her shell and confront her fears over losing loved ones again. That arc would be a critical arc, and I think could be well told, but it's not the only part of Lucina's character I have envisioned. As I mentioned before, she is extremely determined to do whatever it takes to get things done. However, that resolve is tested in Awakening when she figures out Robin is Grima's vessel. In Awakening, she then confronts Robin with falchion, telling Robin she is going to kill him because that is the only way to ensure Grima does not get revived. Crom stops her from doing this in most cases, but in 2 instances, Lucina stops herself from murdering Robin, if Robin is her husband or her mother. That personal bond prevents her from doing what she believed was necessary to prevent a disastrous future. It was a huge test of her resolve, and in the end, she cracked. Now, if you recall, my version of Robin/Grima has a familial bond with Lucina, a strong enough bond that I think could elicit this same reaction when confronted with the truth. Her resolve once again could be tested in much the same way it was in Awakening, and she would find herself once again unable to strike down a member of her family. This event could even happen after her realization of the importance of the bonds of family and friends, which would explain why she felt there was still a possibility to redeem and save Robin. That way, the 2 major arcs I'm talking about could intertwine nicely. To use my description before, this means that Lucina pre-Awakening was burdened by responsibility, has difficulty trusting others, is unwilling to get close to anyone, and rarely shows her true feelings. Over time, she learns to share responsibility, trust others, show her feelings, and establishes close bonds. This character development enables her to move somewhat past her previous difficulties without eliminating them entirely. She still has trouble with many of these things, as seen in Awakening, especially her insecurities about losing loved ones. So she improves regarding her flaws, but the vestiges of her fears and anxieties are still there. I mean, the flaws have to remain. God forbid we create a Mary Sue in this case. After all that, Lucina and her friends head into the final battle with Grima/Robin, prepared to do What? That's the next question I will tackle. And this one is the last of the 3 major focuses of this video, and that's the story, starting with how it ends. There are a few options for how to end the game, some based off previous endings, such as the ones in The Future Past and the Awakening Drama CD. For those who don't know the ending of Future Past, it involves the recovery of the remaining 4 jewels in order to complete the awakening that needs to happen with the Fire Emblem by the other children. Then they face off against Grima, but get beaten until the original shepherds time travel and come to assist them. Grima is thus beaten back, and Lucina and friends are given an opportunity to destroy Grima once and for all, which they succeed in doing. The drama CD ending is for the Lucina and children who traveled back to Awakening's timeline. In this scenario, they are only able to recover 4 out of the 5 gems, and thus cannot complete the ritual needed to help destroy Grima. Naga, though, offers to help them travel back in time to prevent these events from happening in the first place. Grima learns of the plan to leave, however, and destroys Alistal to prevent them from traveling back. Lucina escapes, though, along with her friends, and gets refuge in the temple where the Outrealm Gate is held. They manage to travel back as Grima and his army attack the temple, with Lucina covering the others as they travel back. Here's why, if I was making this game though, I would choose a different ending than both of these. Firstly, these have already been done, and either played or listened to by fans. The game should be new and exciting right up until the very end. For the Future Past ending, the Deus Ex Machina of the original Shepherd showing up seems out of place in the narrative, and would feel disingenuous. These characters are learning to overcome their own terrible situation. Having another army appear at the end to effectively solve it for them takes away from their development as a cohesive, lovable group. The drama CD one, to me, runs the risk of being a down ending. Sure, they escape to live another day, but after investing many hours into the game, we expect our heroes to win. I'm not entirely opposed to this style ending, as it would fit the guerrilla army narrative already formed in the story, but I think subverting that narrative right at the end is a better ending. Even if I could see a great final scene of the children escaping through while Lucina and the adults I mentioned earlier hold off the Risen and Grima, then Tiki tells Lucina to go as well, change your fate, we'll hold them off. As cool as that final scene would be, my preferred ending involves them defeating Grima. In this scenario, there is a combination of the 2 endings previously described. Lucina and friends will face off against Grima, with only 4 of the 5 gems. The 5th one will have been in the possession of Grima. Perhaps there was even a failed mission to recover the gem prior to this almost climactic battle. Note, I said almost climactic, because the battle I'm going to describe is not the final end, but more the beginning of the end. As Grima taunts Lucina, reveling in his victory because, once again, like the Future Past, he managed to defeat them. All hope seems lost for the heroes. But from behind Lucina, then, a voice rings out.
Amateur.
A bolt of lightning strikes Grima, causing him to rear back. I recall it once being said that Grima could only be defeated by his own hand. It seems that power is inheritable. Morgan, previously defeated by the new Shepherd and left to die by Grima, joins up with Lucina now and manages to weaken Grima to the point where Robin is able to take over. At that moment, Robin reveals his identity to Lucina and begs her to kill him. Robin tells Lucina where to locate the final gem and apologizes to Morgan while also stating how proud he is of her. The remainder of the game then is spent with the mission to recover the gem, then the mission to perform the awakening, and then facing off in the true end against Grima to defeat him once and for all. Oh, and Morgan does not actually have the power to destroy Grima, as she mistakenly claimed in my version. Tiki tells her that because she is blood related to Grima, her power can weaken and disorient him, but cannot kill him. hence why Robin emerged, taking over in Grima's weakened state, but also explaining why he couldn't be defeated right then and there. Thus, the combination of Morgan's power and Lucina's awakening plus Falchion is how they ultimately defeat Grima. I believe that to be a satisfying ending that enables Morgan's storyline to be woven in, Lucina and the others to wrestle with the question of saving Robin or destroying him and Grima for a couple chapters after this event, and for the build-up to lead to an epic final battle. And once again, it changes the narrative and sets the new shepherds as the aggressors in that final stretch, changing up the gameplay and offering a new challenge to the players. That effectively covers everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. Certainly, there's more to think about with regards to this game, and I could talk for hours about it. But this outline is a good base for the game, in my opinion. There are parts that are left out, from major choices like how to handle the character development of the other children, to minor but important choices like how to prevent shipping wars from breaking out around who the parents of the children are. My solution for that one is just make everyone's hair color their established parents' color for the most part. Hopefully though, this video has been informational, thought-provoking, and entertaining. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and continue the conversation in the comments, especially if you have other ideas or thoughts on an Awakening sequel. I'd love to talk more about my ideas and hear yours as well. For now though, I will bid you adieu. Hope you have a great day, and happy gaming.